I wanted to tell you about an experience of the divine that I had, and about all the questions and thoughts and puzzles that emerged after that. I'll also be describing where that eventually led to and how that happened, which can be found in two books I've written. One, The God in Us, and the other, What is God in Us? Some people think that if you have had an experience like mine, you think you're better than other people. No, I don't think that. Some people think you're crazy. You're hallucinating or having illusions. When I hear that, I find it laughable, and I'll try to describe why. Some people suggest that if you shared things like this at dinner parties, you won't be invited anymore. So you can decide how to handle that. I have no idea why I had the experience I had at the age of 19. I certainly didn't deserve it. And I consider it, I know that I didn't deserve it, but somehow I had it. This was a sense experience. I had it at 19. It was the second semester of my first year at Haverford College, and I'll describe it briefly. It was a spring day, and I went back to my dorm room. I was there by myself, and I have a memory that I felt a little down, and I lay down on my bed in that room. And after a certain period of time, I noticed that the room filled with light. And along with the light, there was an experience of love, which was anything unlike, was not like anything I had experienced up to that time or since then. It felt like an embracing love. There was also a communication, a very clear communication, though there was no voice, just as there was no face, only the light. And the communication was everything was going to be okay. Now, at the time, I took that to mean about the world, not about me. There was no nothing else was explained. The experience lasted for about 2 minutes, and then I think it ended. At the time, there was no question in my mind that this was an experience of the divine. But I thought to myself, well, first of all, it freaked me out. And I didn't share this with anybody for 15 or 20 years except for one person. Secondly, I wondered, could I have imagined this? And my thought was and is, it is inconceivable that I could have imagined this, because I can't imagine that I could have created the experience of love that I had. Now, once I began, and this was a sense experience, once I began sharing this experience in the last, I would say, probably 3 or 4 years, other people began sharing similar, though not identical, experiences that they had had. And one in particular I remember described an almost identical experience to mine with almost the same words, but she saw Jesus and I saw the light. I don't think it matters. People can have this sort of experience in different ways. William James, who wrote a book about such experiences called Varieties of Religious Experience, if you read it and read about the experiences, they do in fact differ. Somebody might say, well, what if another person says they had an experience of the divine that told that person to do something crazy? I don't know how often that happens. I say I only know of my own experience, which wasn't that, and which was very consistent with what I have learned since then, in a way I will describe. That was one of the ways in which I felt that I knew the divine. There were two other ways. The second way is what I called, and by the way, these were surprises, contemplative or analytic meditation, which also could be called contemplative reflection. What that is, for me, what it was I would go somewhere, usually reading, writing, and thinking, and I became aware of the fact that some of the thoughts that I was having, and the way in which they tied together and what they were thoughts that I could not have created by myself. That's how it felt to me. And you can read about those thoughts in the two books I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. Whatever you believe about God and spirituality, you will decide for yourself. I can't get you to believe anything. I can only put out my experience and thoughts, just as you can put out yours. I used to say that my experience did not affect my path, that I did not get sandals, a staff, and a rod and start walking around. But in retrospect, only in retrospect, after decades, did I see a connection between my experience and the rest of my life. The connection was this. I spent 45 years teaching, and I always was trying to help students discover their own skills and develop them. And I now see that as serving others, which I think ties in very much with the experience I had. For example, Martin Buber talks about how God can be experienced when you're with the other, another, and so does Emmanuel Levinas. Did I lead a holy life afterwards? No, I was still flawed. Some people would suggest that the way I describe my experience depends on my language, my concepts, and my social context, which affected my experience. My response to that is, so what? Of course, any experience you have, you will use the language and the concepts that you have. But words, while they partly succeed, also fail. For example, the word love, which is the only word I can think of to describe my experience, in a way doesn't fully capture that experience, but it's the best I can do. I also want to talk about some developments in science, especially in the last century and this century. Relativity theory and quantum physics say that the observer influences or affects the observation. That may be true. And of course that raises the question of whether the experience came from me or came from God. I think that's not the dichotomy. I think God has something to do with us. I think of God as in us, through us, and with us. I think that's also true for those who don't believe in God. They can have an ethical reality and an ethical potential and compassion, even if they don't believe in God. That is, think about the grace of that. Why did I spend so many years not thinking about this? I don't know. I was otherwise occupied. I don't think I was wasting my time. I do not call what I experienced of imagination, though some people use that term. I did not imagine this. This was a sense experience. I want to talk about the ethical implications for me of my experience. The experience primarily was one of love. And so the implication for me was that I should love. The light didn't tell me what to do. This is an inference. It seems to me an obvious, it's not a stretch. And it seems to me an obvious, something that obviously follows what I experienced. And by love I mean wanting the best for others and acting on that. The Dalai Lama refers to increasing the happiness of others and reducing their suffering as love. I might note that love does not require you to like your neighbor. It seems funny or strange to me to apply the word faith to my experience. It's like saying I have faith that this chair is here. Or that I have faith that I just heard or got such and such a communication. Even to call my subsequent focus on love and justice, and by the way, by justice I mean above all helping those who are worst off. Even to call my subsequent focus on love and justice faith seems a category error to me, a strange use of the word faith. I say this though I know I'm not God and see but through a glass darkly. I can't be certain, I can't have scientific certainty. I don't think you can prove or disprove God. I can't get to where I am using pure logic. That's impossible, either to affirm or deny what I'm saying. But I think the idea of trust, loyalty, and commitment, the original meaning of the word credo, that I think would fit. And of course I do have beliefs. Well, what about doubt, the issue of doubt? So far I don't feel it. Doubt just means you can't be certain about certain things. On the other hand, I don't have a problem with doubt. It is a way to cleanse your beliefs. And I think where this may come in, where doubt may come in, and also where reason may come in, is trying to figure out how general views about love and justice, what to do in specific situations. That's often the hardest thing to do. I confess that I get a kick out of how people deal with my experience if I share it with them. A friend of mine who hates religion said to me, whatever psychotic or psychedelic experience you had, I was not on drugs, by the way, at the time, and or during that period, or after. Another person talked about having hallucinations and delusions. I find that laughable. It was a sense experience. People report different things about their experiences, different from mine and different from each other's. My response is, so what? I can only report my own experience and then raise questions about it, which I am doing. That raises a question about the criterion of scientific reliability, because when you do an experiment, different people are supposed to get the same result. And of course, we're talking here about different experiences. But what's interesting about religion is that in a certain way there is a kind of reliability. As Karen Armstrong points out, almost all religions have as their central idea compassion. William James refers to, in talking about these experiences, refers to cosmic consciousness, a feeling of unity. Would that describe what I experienced? I think so in a certain way. I not only felt embraced by the love of God, but when I got the message, everything will be okay, it did seem like a oneness to me. The world was a oneness, so one could think of that as a feeling of unity. What was or is valuable to me about my experience? Well, one thing is knowing and experiencing divinity. Are there other ways of knowing God without such an experience? I'm sure that's the case. I might add, by the way, that at a certain point there was a third basis for me of knowing God, which was a feeling, I remember where I was at the time, when I was doing the work that eventually became part of my book, that God would approve of what I was doing. That for me was a third way of knowing God. And I think there are many other ways of knowing God. I know what I know, including my experience and including from what I've called contemplative meditation. I also want to point out that the fact that people have different experiences and also that people have different religions does not mean that God does not exist. God reveals God in different ways. The experience is also not a proof of God, because I don't think you can either prove or disprove God. But people experience God in different ways. And for example, because life has different meanings for different people, does not mean life has no meaning. It has different meanings for different people. I don't spend a lot of time praying. My reading, thinking, and writing is my prayer. Being with others is my prayer. Listening to others is part of my prayer. I don't particularly recommend my path or my journey. You have to discover your own path, your own journey. Buddha said, "Don't believe what I say, just put in practice what I suggest." And I think if you put in practice love and justice, you will be very pleased with what you discover. There was no method in my having the experience I had. I didn't seek it. William James points out says that the incommunicableness of the transport, that's what he calls the experience, is the keynote of all mysticism, which is a word commonly used for an experience of the divine. Mystical truth, he says, exists for the individual who has the experience, but for no one else. In that regard, it might resemble sense experience. So why am I trying to communicate this to you? I don't know, except how could I not? Perhaps because I think that I can communicate something of it, including the mentioning where words actually fail. In light of my experience, should I have done more? Probably, but I'm satisfied. We could all do more. I don't beat myself up about this. I accept my limits and I try to do more now. If God is going to have a relationship with us, God has to have a way to communicate with us, a way that we can receive or get. Why would we expect there would be only one way that communication would occur? We also have to have a way to communicate with God. One way is how we live our lives. What does my revelation teach me? The divine exists. Love and justice are of the highest importance, which means act accordingly. I know that most people don't have experiences like this. I consider it grace. I know of no better word for it. Having this kind of experience should have consequences for how I live. It did, it has. I think one of the most important things that William James says about such experience is that the most important revelations from mystical experience are theological or metaphysical. By that, James means that what gives the experience, he says, that's what gives the experience power. For me, it was the importance of love and justice and acting on that. So it's that connection between the experience and certain beliefs or ideas that are absolutely critical. James asks, what are the fruits of these experiences for life? And that is an important question. He also says that some or all of these conditions are pathological. I don't know why he says that. It seems silly to me. Pathological means caused by, or of the nature, caused by a physical or mental disease. He offers no basis for saying that, and I think in general there is no basis for saying that. I think the reason that he says that is he has no categories for such experience. Or if he has categories which might describe or explain the experience, he doesn't accept them, like, for example, God. Can you get, one question that people raise is, can you get beyond your consciousness in having such experiences? The answer is no, because you always end up in your consciousness. But what is the significance of that? I think that has very little significance. When I had my experience, of course, I had it as a conscious experience. But does that make what I experienced and sensed unreal? No. How high an expectation of myself should I have in light of my experience? I have a pretty high expectation now, which I think I generally try to meet. But I am realistic. I accept myself. And I think that in some way, and I think self-acceptance is better than despair. Finally, where does this leave me? All of this. The way I want to get at that is to talk for a little, just very briefly about mathematics, the mathematics of the universe. We don't know how the laws of physics got embedded into the universe. Mathematicians make up mathematics, and then to their astonishment, those things often can describe and explain physical things in the universe. And mathematicians talk about the beauty of mathematics. And by the beauty of mathematics, they mean it's simple, it's elegant, and it's deep and rich. And deep and rich means it can explain a lot of different things. Well, I think that love and justice, in a certain way, are the mathematics of the universe. And they are, those are simple ideas, and they are deep and rich. For example, someone like Robert Wright, who wrote a book called The Evolution of God, which is not about the evolution of God, but is about the evolution of people's beliefs in God, points out that on those occasions, there are some occasions where people say, well, our God is better than your God, we have to kill you, we have to enslave you, we have to burn your villages, and so on. At other times, people could accept other religions and didn't feel they had to enslave or kill. And Robert Wright points out that that occurred, he says, when people engaged in mutually beneficial relationships. And if you think about it, with a view of love and justice, that is more likely to lead you to mutually beneficial relationships. That's an example of the richness of these simple ideas of love and justice. Will, our free will or our will, is what lets us choose or not choose love and justice, what I call the mathematics of the universe. That's where will comes in. That's why will exists. And we can discover, that is, perceive and recognize the mathematics of the universe and its beauty. And that all has to do with consciousness. Consciousness allows us to be aware of all of that. I believe it is not an accident that we have will and that we have consciousness. These have their purposes. I think that they were intended, and they can be of great benefit to us. If we try to follow this, not only will it be better for us as individuals and how we feel, but also it'll be better for the world. Thank you.